Hello viewers, round 5 of the Manufacturers Cup is upon us. This is a 20 lap race around Daytona road course. I'm in Porsche for this season, so back into the 911. Why don't we jump straight in? Let's do this. Yes indeed, let's jump into this qualifying session. Obviously always an important thing to get right, which is why heading here into turn 1 we get it completely wrong. Going incredibly wide, about 5 miles beyond the apex. And how about this one? Pretty much the same story. The apex was many nautical miles over to the right hand side there, and so this first lap was not a good attempt. A 46.3, 1.5 seconds away from pole position. So on the second flying lap that we managed to get on this session, much better run through the first corner. How about this one? Still a little bit wide to be fair, but coming back for that late apex, still probably a bit quicker than the previous attempt. So as you can see, I was up in every sector until we get to the bus stop here. Very tricky sequence of corners to round out the lap here at the Daytona road course. But it was an improvement. That is up to a 45 mid, or a low 45. Good enough for 7th on the grid. And therefore we jump into the race pretty much in the mid-pack with not much of an idea of the strategy. This is the second time slot out of the 3, and often most people have done the first one by this point and are a little bit more sure with the strategy. So we're going to jump in here. I was aware that fuel saving would very much be an element here, and therefore trying to stay in the slipstream train of the cars in front would be quite pivotal to a good result. We've had many races like this around Daytona in the recent past, whereby fuel saving kind of determines the race. But we're going in here, trying to work it out as we go along. So coming through the bus stop, end of lap number 1, the Corvette driver here gets it a little bit wrong, just gives a small bit of space on the exit, and rather than bump draft him, I thought, you know what, let's just go through, move up into 6th position, receive the bump draft from behind, and try to get back onto terms with this group in front, which, as you can see, wasn't too difficult because they were fighting quite heavily. And so I was able to get straight back into the slipstream of the gigantic wing on this Genesis in front. So following nice and closely here in 6th place. This is only the second lap, so plenty of time left in the race. This was pretty much a case of, do we go for the overtake or do we just bump draft? Let's bump draft him. Let's get back onto terms here with the top 4. They are beginning just to pull away slightly. This is the end of lap 4. And you can see the Genesis there makes a bit of a mistake. The opening is created on the exit, and so we're going to go for that move once again, kind of reminiscent of the move on lap 1. Coming into turn 1, lap 5. Once again, this group in front not really working together too well, and so I was able to quite quickly reel them in and pull onto the back of this very varied group of cars. It was quite an interesting race because you're seeing lots of the sort of more modern day race cars like the 911. I know it isn't the current gen. You've got a lot of these sort of 90s cars. We've got the GT500 in the lead. We've got the Toyota Supra that just went past. Then we've got the 4GT up in front, which is always a bit of an anomaly in these races. As lap number 6 comes round, and I'm up into 4th. However, we're just going to lose a position here, not really carrying enough speed through the apex, and I seem to be struggling with rotation mid-corner in the 911. So dropping back down to 5th. Crossing the line to begin lap 8. Things are going okay, I think. I mean, it's one of those races where you're not quite sure. Well, I mean, for that guy, I know it's definitely not going well because he's hit the apex. And they do say, you know, hit the apex, but not like that. Not like that, guys. You're not supposed to actually physically strike the barrier. That is not recommended. So we're going to gain a position there, and another one up against the Genesis. I kind of created an opening there, half across the grass, through the chicane. Coming through the chicane at the bus stop, lap number 9, you can see they're having all manner of issues with it on the entry, going over the grass, over the curb. Just, just a bit too much lock. And as I am now the the leader of this 4-car train, I do have some responsibility to start getting a move on. Guys behind kind of relying on me to press forward and catch back up with these guys, but coming through this left-hander, just getting onto the power a bit too early over the bump and making a very rookie error, dropping a handful of positions back down to 6th and getting a track limit penalty, which is so frustrating because I was halfway through spinning out, definitely didn't gain any time, and that kind of forced my hand. You serve the penalty, you drive straight into the pit lane, you minimise the time lost by doing that. I would have ideally liked to stay out a little bit longer. But this was an example of a race that really kind of goes down the drain, and it's just something that happens, I was going to say from time to time, but often in my case it's all the time. But end of lap 13, start of 14 now, you see cars just beginning to come in and out of their pit stops, and now I'm down here in 9th place with quite a handful of cars, let's say 3 or 4 or 5 seconds up in front. There is someone still in the lead who is yet to pit, but we can kind of ignore them for the time being. We have lost a good 5-6 seconds to the cars we were battling earlier. And this just shows you the patience required and the strategy required to succeed in this race. Perhaps wasn't fuel saving enough. We get bumped here into turn 1 going wide. And even though we do get the penalty, the position back, just losing touch slightly with the cars in front every time we have a bit of a battle for 9th place here. Now, things were about to get much worse for me as we head into the bus stop, three abreast, and this is just suboptimal, not to be recommended. And I wasn't really sure of where that Corvette was. I would have thought he'd backed out, but it didn't, and unfortunately we make contact, and so much momentum lost, so much time lost, and the race is pretty much just going down the drain by this point. And it's about to get even worse here because we have the Mercedes going for the position, that's fine. So we kind of coast to let him go through. He doesn't go through. We get bumped from behind again from the Corvette. And as a result of that, to lose more time and get rear bumper damage. And so this was a catastrophic failure of all dimensions. And it's a race that is certainly one that I'd like to forget in a hurry. With all this bumper damage, it was quite a miserable ending, finishing there eventually in 12th place. Well, that was a complete disaster. We're going to have to go again. Okay, second attempt. We can try and go a little bit better here. Ideally, 12th is not really a good enough result for us. The qualifying wasn't too bad last time. It was very close, but we can just try to eke out a few more tenths compared to the previous attempt. So 45.6 on that first lap, not too bad, but we need to be getting into the low 45s at least, perhaps even the high 44s. And so on this second flying lap, you only really get time for 2 laps. I had to get this one right, as we're currently sat in 7th, which is not too bad, but I think in this kind of fuel saving type race, starting further forward does really help, in the sense that you save a bit more fuel by starting further forward, but also you don't have to overtake as many cars, and therefore you don't have to kind of use up fuel overtaking people. So the reasons for qualifying higher up are kind of twofold. I guess you could say threefold, because there's just more chance of danger the further back you are, or more to the middle of the pack you are. So this lap was looking pretty good. 2 3/4 tenths saved in sector 2. Bus stop was pretty good. It felt better than the first attempt. 4 and a bit tenths up, crossing the line, and it was an improvement up into 3rd. Okay, that was a lot better, guys. 3rd on the grid. We know the strategy now. Don't get penalties and don't spin out and don't drive like crap. Yeah, you get the picture. Let's try and have a good race here. Immediately into lean setting 6 to save a little bit of fuel here on the run up to the start of the race. So surrounded by Porsches either side, we have a Citroen in the lead, interestingly. So once again, like the first race, quite a mix of cars. Well, I mean, the Porsches aren't a mix of cars. There's 3 of us in a row. But this manufacturer series always throws up some weird races. It's not always easy to know which are the best cars, especially in different conditions. This race is very much one of top-end speed, but also fuel saving. That would be the main element we're trying to work upon here, as we kind of get towards the 2/3 mark of lap 1. You see already the top 2 just beginning to pull clear, and I might have been a little bit too hasty with my fuel saving. I really wanted to save a lot more fuel this time around. I don't think I did a good enough job, but this race is about to unravel in so many ways for so many different people here, because on the exit of the bus stop, as you can see as we look behind, that is not an optimal line there for the Porsche over the grass. He was about to turn right, or continue turning right off the exit, and put himself and someone else into the wall. So an awful result there for the Porsche boys, with 2 of their cars in the wall, and a penalty for the car in front. So this race was about to become a lot more spread out than the previous one, which kind of remained quite a close-knit race for a lot of it. This one already beginning to spread, and it tends to follow a similar pattern, these kinds of races. People settle in, try and save fuel, wait for the pit stop, and then dice it out in the second half of the race after the pit stop. But this one looks like it might be a little bit different here, with the Citroen in the lead, beginning to try to stretch the race. And so I have this kind of important decision to make. Do I rev out the car, use up more fuel, try and hunt them down, in the process obviously using more fuel, or do I kind of just wait and just play the longer game? Hard to know. But if we take a look at the time gap to the leader, coming out of the bus stop, it was about 1.5 flat. But as you can see, that Citroen seemed to have really good top end speed. I'm not fuel saving by this point, and so it is pretty much a direct battle. So I knew that this would be quite a difficult race to catch up with this guy, because you see there I've just lost maybe a quarter of a second. I think he did kind of coast into the corner, lost a little bit at the end there, but pretty much 2/10 lost on the straight, and that's kind of very difficult to gain back. The Porsche is a good car overall, there's no question about that. However, I think its key weakness would be top end, and with the lengthy straights we have here at Daytona, that's not a good problem to have. But here on lap number 4, I was kind of waiting for support. I was not really able to catch up with this guy on my own. What I needed was a helping hand in the form of this Lexus, who had managed to break clear from the pack behind and catch up to me. Now, this guy would go through, and I was not too displeased about this. I thought, you know what, this is fine. I can tuck in, we could work together and try to reel back in the leader. And also, by being sat behind this guy, the fuel saving possibilities, I wouldn't say were endless, but were certainly heightened compared to being on your own. And so now it was a case of just trying to follow this guy as closely as possible, bump drafting up the straight, saving a bit more fuel, and once again playing the longer game. The pack behind incredibly close, and what you do notice about fuel saving races is that the bigger the pack, yes, they can fight a lot more, but if they play it sensibly, they should be a lot stronger, because they can bump draft a lot more, they can save a lot more fuel. So the bigger the pack, the stronger they tend to be as a unit. Whereas us 3 guys at the front here, kind of a little bit split apart, not really working in any sort of group at all. And therefore, there's always a threat here that, you know, the cars behind, even though they are 2 and a bit seconds away, can kind of play the longer game, save a lot more fuel, and come back into the picture later on. Now, I was struggling a lot through the bus stop, but on this lap, number 8, I've managed to get it a lot better. And you can see the difference here. We're just highlighting the gap between myself and the leader. And rather than the gap increasing, it is now coming down, courtesy of this very helpful slipstream. And it just shows you the difference that it makes. So rather than losing 2/10, I'm pretty much gaining 2/10. So it's kind of a 4/10 swing in the other direction. And that is massive. You know, the gap comes down here to 1.8, 1.9, whereas it would have kind of been 2.5 perhaps, or 2.3, something like that, if not for the slipstream. However, lap number 9, this struggle through the entry phase of the bus stop seemed to be a reoccurring theme, and it wasn't easy to get right, especially as the Porsche tends to wear out its rear tyres quite quickly, and then it just becomes a little bit more tricky to handle the car as the stint develops. A couple of cars behind going into the pit lane, 18, 24, 16% of fuel remaining. I still had 29. So I was quite confident that I was doing a good job with fuel. Not easy to know exactly where you fit in here. I mean, the guy in second might be doing a much better job than me. Likewise, the leader. So it's not always easy to know exactly where you stand in comparison to your rivals. But this is not going to help my cause at all. You can see they're just driving slightly over the curb, and if you go beyond that curb at all, it's an immediate penalty, 0.5. And once again, it's going to force my hand here into the pit lane. So ideally, I would have liked to stay out a bit longer, but saving the time, coming immediately into the pit lane, and just over-fueling the car slightly, giving me the ability to rev the car out at the remainder of this race. So this is a very important lap, or couple of laps here, as we do need to keep up with that group in front. So you can see I had a nice little healthy gap over the cars behind, but these were the cars I had to worry about. First, second and third, it was really a direct battle between myself and them. The guys behind are 5 seconds behind and don't really stand a chance of catching unless I run out of fuel or get some penalties. My race really is for a position within the top 4. Just which position is yet to be determined. So coming back out onto the banking, lap number 13 into the bus stop chicane, and I see that the top 3 all go into the pit lane. Now interestingly, they are quite a low percentage, 4, 6 and 5, and yes, I went in a lap earlier, but that seemed quite low, and they seem to refuel quite a lot as well, and therefore when we come around here, it's quite interesting to see this. I wasn't quite sure exactly what had happened here, because I came out still in 4th, and I would have thought I'd come out a little bit higher than that. Perhaps I did overfuel slightly, but it doesn't really explain this massive gap here still to this leader. So the Lexus driver, Alex, must have short fueled his car quite significantly, or didn't take tyres, and therefore has a 6 second, or at one point nearly 7 second advantage over myself. And that's quite a sizable difference to try to catch up in only 7 laps here. And so my main priority at the moment would be to try and catch up with the 2 guys in front, which was quite tricky because they were in the slipstream of each other, or at least third here. The Citroen was in the slipstream of second, and that made it difficult for me to catch up and keep up. He did give me a helping hand there through turn 1, but I was struggling just to keep up. I was always on the fringes of the slipstream, just pushing a little bit too hard there. You can see by my reaction, I knew that that was a mistake, and I knew that penalty was coming. Just pushing a little bit too hard just to get back into that slipstream. I just needed a few more tenths, but I couldn't quite get it. It was so frustrating. And serving that penalty felt like getting shot. Not that I've been shot, but I can imagine it would feel similar to how I felt serving that penalty there. It really was very painful indeed. Heading into towards turn 1. Lap 16, the gap to the car in front 1.8, gap to the leader 6.2, and so things weren't really looking too good there. So a bit of a lifeline thrown to me here as the Citroen goes through on the Aston Martin. So Stefanzi kind of came out of nowhere in this race. He was sat nicely, I believe in 6th place, a few seconds behind me before the pit stop, and has suddenly jumped ahead, presumably by either underfueling, but I don't think he underfueled. It must have been because of not taking fresh tyres, and that's not something I think I would have liked to have done. So as you can see, through the first corner I managed to gain sort of half a second in one turn, and that would probably explain a lack of grip courtesy of not changing the tyres. So we do have a tyre advantage over this guy, but it's not going to be easy because the Aston Martin is still quite a good car and the Porsche still not with the best straight line speed. I'm certainly gaining, and we're still gaining on the leader, in fact 4.8 the gap with 3 laps remaining. So it's not impossible, it's not a race I could still rule out the race win. It's going to be quite difficult from here. Right onto the back of Stefanzi into turn 1. I think he's struggling with grip a little bit. You see there a bit of a slide on the exit, and so despite that ginormous rear wing on the Aston Martin, struggling for rear end grip. Let's see, I'm not changing tyres, so we're going to have to try and get past this guy as quickly as possible, I think, and make some progress forward. try to catch up with that Lexus, maybe even the Citroen. And I think this kind of shows you such a race of close margins. I feel like the 2 penalties I got really cost me, like massively. I think without those, I would have been probably right this very second, without those 2 penalties, I would be just ahead, or if not slightly behind that Citroen, which wouldn't be the worst situation because I'll be getting slipstream and we'd both be pushing towards the leader together, and we would have been bump drafting, would have helped quite a lot. Now, end of lap 18, only 2 laps to go by this point. Safunzi here kind of just concedes the position. He moves to the right, doesn't really resist at all, and easily hands the position over. And it might seem like the race there is done and dusted. I'm up into 3rd and going to keep it from here to the end, but you just never quite know around Daytona. If someone remains in your slipstream, they always have a chance of repassing you and getting the position back. So I was very wary of that. I didn't want to let this guy stay within the slipstream range, so I had to try and push as much as possible to eke out that gap, as I was doing. 8/10 the gap now as we go through the bus stop, lap number 19. Just looking at that battle for the lead, I'm only 3.5 seconds away from the lead, and as you can see, the Citroen is actually really reeling in that Lexus, and you never quite know what's going to happen between the 2 of them. We're going on to the final lap, and therefore things could get heated between the 2 of them, and you know, any sort of contact or a penalty could change the complexion of the race. It doesn't quite happen for me. They played it quite safe. Luca in the Citroen did manage to go through into the lead. Alex in the Lexus therefore dropping down to 2nd, and I think again, without those penalties, it could have been a very different race. But we are going to bring home a 3rd place, so still a solid and consistent result. Rubbing some errors there, but a safe and a solid podium ultimately at the end. Okay, 3rd place in the end. Not too bad of a result, I think. The win might have been possible with a few different things there, but I think we'll take a 285 points. Okay, results are in. 546 total points. Still need to break into the top 5% for Porsche and the region, but I'll take that as a good round. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.